Miscellaneous minds, never explaining the minds. Devilish grin for my alias, aliens who respond. Peddling sin, thinking maybe when you get old you realize I'm not gonna fold or demise. I don't smoke crack, motherfucker, I sell it.
What is going on, everybody? This is the Miscellaneous Minds podcast. I'm your co-host, Boom Arigato, the cat that hands you your accuracy back. And to my left over here is my man, Sister Nero, the man that makes the fat stacks. Together we form the dynamic duo that won't die. Deadly ideas, run and spice your content, your OnlyFans.
What is going on, everybody? Before we get into tonight's topic, please make sure to like, comment, hate, subscribe, DM us about the bullshit. And with that, let's get right into it. So, accuracy is not a word we would normally use to describe this individual. No disrespect. I think he's a funny motherfucker, but he says some out-of-pocket shit that I definitely don't agree with. Sean Strickland. Very recently, he made a comment about a comment that Paige Vanzant had made, basically stating she's made more money on OnlyFans in the short time that she's been there compared to the entirety of her UFC career. Sean came out and said, "You were hired because you were pretty. You weren't very impressive as a fighter." And then he followed up with the comments, "Women's MMA ain't shit." First of all, let's right from the get-go, cross it off the bat. He's tripping on the women's MMA and shit. I'm not gonna lie, I've seen a lot of women's MMA fights that have been more exciting than a lot of the men's. So that comment, out of pocket, absolutely don't disagree with. So let's cross that off the line. That way people don't bitch and say that we're co-signing everything that Sean Strickland said. Again, a lot of dope MMA women's fights. I was personally very happy the first time Ronda Rousey took a L. The way that it happened, phenomenal. Can't go on more about it. A lot of Amanda Nunes' fight, including the losses that she had. Great fucking fights, was all there for him. Okay, now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's address the previous comment. You were hired because you were pretty. Let's keep it 100. Paige Vanzant, when she was up and coming in UFC, I can't remember the other individual, her male counterpart.
Sage Northcutt.
Sage Northcutt, thank you. She was paired with him, and they were basically being the Barbie and Ken of the UFC. So, of course, she was hired because she was pretty. Now, that's not to say she's not a great MMA fighter, which I personally don't think she was, but that's not to say it was strictly because she was pretty. But it was absolutely one of the factors. So let's keep it 100. Anyone that says it's not true doesn't respect the fact that pretty privilege exists. It absolutely is. Now, the second thing, of course, she made more money getting butt naked on OF than she did her entirety of her UFC career. First of all, we have been very critical of the pay structure that Dana White has in the UFC. Very critical. Go back, watch many of our videos where we've talked about UFC fights and content surrounding Dana and the UFC. I'll be surprised if there's one video within those that we don't criticize the pay structure. So, saying I got paid more doing blank than I got paid in the UFC, not a big surprise. Not a big surprise there. But, specifically, a medium in which a pretty girl gets nude for the internet. Come on. Come on. Who are we really going to pretend that there's some sort of surprise there? Are we really going to pretend that Sean Strickland said something that we weren't already all thinking? Come on. The difference is Sean Strickland said it when a lot of other people won't say it. Again, we don't co-sign that women's MMA ain't shit comment. Completely stupid comment to make. But the other two comments completely agree on. Listen. Paige Vanzant has ridden a wave of her being pretty her entire career. Her whole thing is, I'm pretty and I'm a badass. So for her to come out like, oh, this is insulting, it's kind of stupid. Now, there's a couple other people that commented on Sean's comments about women's MMA and shit. And the reason we're not going to address that here is because not only do I have respect for Valentina Shevchenko, and I've seen many of her fights, I'm a big fan, but we've already discussed we don't agree with that statement. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm going to let my man opine on that if you want, but we've already taken away the fact that we disagree with that statement, that yes, women's MMA is dope depending on who's fighting. With that being said, Sean Strickland didn't say anything surprising. Yes, part of the reason she was hired is because she's pretty. Of course, she's making more money getting naked for the internet than she did fighting for Dana White, who is an extremely cheap individual. No fucking surprises there. So I personally co-sign both of those arguments. What do you think about that, my man?
I think the other thing that we need to take into context of the situation was Sean Strickland saying, okay, well, she made more money in UFC she made more money doing, her photo shoots than she did in UFC. And the one thing I had to take away on there, I was like, yes, that might be true. But at the same time, like, given the marquee value of Paige Vanzant, is that really any surprise? Have you ever heard anybody say, oh, Paige Vanzant's fighting this weekend, I can't wait? No. Like, how high of a caliber is Paige Vanzant really? I can think of like 20 different fighters that are like on a higher level than her before I would ever want to watch her fights. Now, again, don't get me wrong. There are a lot of people that would pay for that sort of thing. I think there was even a wrestler in WWE that also made that same claim. And again, Vince McMahon is a cheapskate. There's Dana White and Vince McMahon are pretty much two sides of the same coin. They like to cheapen their contracts for their fighters or independent contractors in a business sense. Try and squeeze them out for as much money as they can and like to squeeze them out for as much performance as they can to make it absolutely advantageous for their business at hand. There's no debate about that. So when they said, oh, I made more money doing shoots, let's say, than I did performing for the WWE UFC, again, that's not a surprise given who the main individuals that are in charge of the organization, like, once you hear everything about how much of a cheapskate are you really surprised? And again, given Paige Vanzant, her marquee value as a fighter, I would say, that makes a little bit more sense. Nobody was lining up for a Paige Vanzant fight unless she was fighting somebody that was already a high caliber fighter in and of itself, that already had a high marquee value. I couldn't remember what weight division she was in, but I can guarantee you there was a lot more people that sold more tickets by virtue of Paige Vanzant, or by virtue of the other fighter being in that fight than Paige Vanzant was. Paige Vanzant sold tickets, but only because of the person that she was fighting against, not necessarily because of Paige Vanzant herself. So to say, oh, she made more money doing this than she did in the UFC, again, it makes sense. Paige Vanzant wasn't that great of a fighter, and she wasn't really that much of a big seller. Let's be honest. So to say, okay, she made more money doing this, yeah, that checks out. I can absolutely believe that. That's what I took away from that personally.
Listen, again, a lot of people already think these things that Sean Strickland said. And again, maybe he was stupid because he commented on, Paige Vanzant coming out and saying, oh, I made more money doing blank. But it's like, okay, but come on. Like, if you're going to make that type of comment, you have to understand the scenario that you've put yourself in, again, as Paige Vanzant. She has always marketed herself as the pretty girl who also fights. The pretty girl that's a badass. And again, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But there's a reason why there's a reason why you market yourself that way. And there's a reason why now the content that you're making probably makes you more money than you made in any of the organizations that you work with. So let's stop the cap acting all surprised and, oh my God, he said this stuff. Again, she markets herself a certain way for a certain reason. And now that she's, let's call it what it is, an adult entertainer, she's basically fully committed to the field. And again, nothing wrong with that. Just let's be honest about what we're dealing with here. Now that we've made those comments, I think as a society, we need to start accepting these realities of the situation because, again, it is what it is. However an individual wants to market themselves, there is nothing wrong with that. Just don't try to play both sides. Don't try to be like, oh, I can't believe you're making these sexist comments. But you market yourself that way. If you do it yourself, is it really a sexist comment? Is it really against women? No, it's against Paige Vanzant. So let's stop all the cap. Stop being so babyish about all this stuff. Let's stop being such little sweethearts on the internet and get back to the reality of things, which is why we created this podcast. And with that, like, comment, hate, subscribe, DM us about the bullshit, and
until next time, get rest and stay blessed. We'll see you on the next one.